Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Neil Silcox. I am the Faculty Excellence Lead with the Maple League of Universities. I'm speaking to you today from beautiful Chipuktuk in unceded Mi'kma'ki. We've got people joining from all over the place. So if you would care to pop into the chat where you are coming from in the world, I always love to see. I'm really excited for this session, Cornucopia of Creativity, with Elizabeth Wells and Toni Roberts. These are two terrific people that I work with very closely throughout the year as part of the MLTLC, the Maple League Teaching and Learning Center, who presents the Better Together sessions. And Toni is the co-chair of the MLTLC, is also the Purdy Crawford Professor of Teaching and Learning at Mount Allison, and the Jarislowsky Visiting Scholar at Bishop's University in Teaching and Learning. And Elizabeth Wells is a professor of music history and musical theater, mid 20th century musical theater, which is like, is there anything better? And this is a terrific session, Cornucopia of Creativity, that has been a real hit, a real success in the past. And I'm really excited to get to see today. So without further ado, I will throw over to you. Take it away, Elizabeth and Toni.
Thanks. Toni and I will we thank you for that wonderful introduction, Neil. We're really happy to be here. For many of you who know us, Toni and I have been working together for, I don't know, almost 20 years on different kinds of presentations. And this one came about because we decided, let's just sort of collect a whole series of the little things that we do and put together kind of a whole series of things that we do that we find really creative and that we've really found helpful in the classroom, and just present them as a cornucopia. So that's where we're coming from. We have many more that we don't have time for today, but we're going to go through the ones that we have and just talk about them a little bit, and then we'll open it up to some discussion. So Toni, if that's good for you, that's good for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are going to share some of our creative approaches, I suppose, and get you to sort of think about yours as well. Now, when we've done this in the past, there has been a little more time for application, but nonetheless, I think it's important for us to, try to nurture and to encourage our creative I think, and it's not easy, right? People sometimes think, oh, creativity is just easy, it just comes to you, you just have to be a certain kind of person or what have you. But it takes a bit of work, if we're being honest. But that's an important thing for us to keep in mind, right? That you can do it, but it may take a little bit of work. All right, before we get started, I've got a little bit of, I think, a creative little video to share with you. It's actually a commercial. So we're going to take a look at that. Let's hope that this works properly.
Zazu condoms. Fun, sexy, safe.
Now, for some of you,
those of us who are childless, yeah.
This may resonate slightly differently with different groups of people, but it is a really creative. I mean, you don't really know where this is going to go as a commercial, I don't think. And it is a little bit of an older commercial, and all of a sudden you're struck with something really quite entertaining, I find. So I thought we would start with that because I do find that a really funny way of advertising condoms, right, to particular populations in this case. If you already have children, I'm sure they're lovely. That's not the point of this commercial. All right, what are we going to do here? Well, we're going to give you a quick tour of some of our ideas and activities that we've used in our teaching practices. If time warrants it, we're going to give you some examples of how you might modify them for your particular setting. So ask a question at any point and say, hey, what could I do in my context? We're going to take questions, hopefully generate some discussion, and hopefully also fire up some creativity here. Now, I do like feminist quotes. That's kind of my, so I love this one from Mary Lou Cook. Creativity is inventing, experimenting, growing, taking risks, breaking rules, making mistakes, and having fun. So I want us to keep that in mind as we go through this session. Okay. So I'm going to start first, and by the way, we're going to go back and forth. Elizabeth is going to present every other slide, basically, and we will probably comment on one another's as well. So it's funny, I was just talking to someone just the other day about learning philosophies in a session. So learning philosophies is kind of where I turn things around a little bit toward the students. So generally, the first class, I will actually present my teaching philosophy and talk to the students about my teaching philosophy. They don't necessarily have to read my teaching philosophy, but I tell them about my general commitments, my ideologies, my philosophies. So I use it at the very beginning of a course, or could be beginning of a program. I do provide my own teaching philosophy as a model to let them know I have been thinking about my teaching. But here's what's different. I ask students to define their learning philosophy. And I do that by using some guiding questions to get them thinking about what's important for their learning philosophies. We've been talking a lot the last little while about things like external and internal motivations for grading and ungrading. We've had our ungrading book club, for example. And this is where I want the students to think about these kinds of things. What is your motivation here for learning? Is it because you want an A+? Is it because you want to learn something new? Do you want to change the world? Or, as my friend's son is known to say, C's get degrees, mom. I just want to pass. It's what I want to do. So I want to learn enough to pass this course. What I think this does is, as I mentioned, it shifts things a little bit. And if we did combine this with something like ungrading, I think it can be particularly powerful. It creates ownership and responsibility, I think, over the learning. And it communicates quite clearly as well. It's not just about you. This comes up quite regularly, I find, in my work as an educational developer, where it's all about what can we do, what can we do, what can we do as faculty members. And occasionally there might be some discussion about students and their responsibilities, but I think that gets a little lost at times. Students do need to meet us halfway, and I think this helps focus. It requires students to ask themselves kind of big questions about why, not just why they're in this particular course, although I do ask that as well, but why do they want to learn? What's going on there? Is it just to get a job? And I've had that from students as well. I just want to get a job. I need this course as part of my degree, or this is an elective, it's a distribution credit, and so on. I mentioned already, it helps students focus their own approaches as well, what works well for them for their own learning, because that's one of the questions I get them to ask is, or to answer rather, is not just about their philosophy, but what works well for their learning. So I ask them, like, what has basically been your best learning experience and your worst learning experience, and also what works for their learning, like a quiet room, a dark room, days, mornings, afternoons, evenings, what it happens to be. I think it can be combined with VARC. Now, I know learning styles are not perfect, but I think they can help us in some ways, in a general sense, guide us a little bit. All right, so that's our first approach, our first creative cornucopia, I guess, a component of our cornucopia. Let's call it the pear in the cornucopia. Let's go on
Can
to an
I,
apple
can I
now.
just jump in here, Tony?
Yeah, of course, Elizabeth.
So I just wanted to say I didn't know which one of us was going to use these slides because I do exactly the same thing in my
Yes,
class.
I
And I'll
know.
just give you a slightly different spin on it. I use it at the beginning of my program in music history for majors and minors in a capstone, not a capstone course, a foundation course. So we start out with that because I want those people who are going into music, when all of their parents and family have told them not to do this, you know, why are you doing that? Why are you here? You know, what do you expect to get out of this and how do you learn? So it does many of the same things that Toni does. What I also do with it, though, is that I have these same students sometimes in second, third, and fourth year, and I revisit it. So, you know, we keep, I say to people, keep them. And so when we get to a fourth year capstone research methods, we go back to these philosophies and see how they've changed. Because often from the first week of first year, you've changed quite a bit into what you want to get out of your learning by the time you get to fourth year. So that's what I do with it in terms of reiterating the learning philosophy. But it's funny because I also ask them to do VARC, and I also ask them to read my teaching philosophy so they can see how a philosophy statement is different from uh, a different kind of statement. And I also give them the guiding questions that we give people for teaching philosophy development, you know, changing it from, you know, what people have you learned from, it's just sort of what people have influenced you. You just can to change the questions just a little bit. So thanks, Toni, that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the interesting things about Elizabeth and myself. We do similar things often with slight variations. And we can see, you know, from the social sciences and sociology, and I also teach in psych, so I teach in the sciences as well. And Elizabeth, right, who teaches in the arts and musicology. Excellent, good stuff. Now, the next one is Elizabeth's, and I don't do this next one.
I just wanted to jump in there.
No, of course, that's the whole point. There we go. Go ahead.
Okay, this one I love. Now this one works better if the students are really attached to like something like music where they consider themselves musicians or artists, but it's a personal subject specific histories. So what I ask people to do, and this is in the first couple of weeks of classes, is please think about your personal music history. So I talked to them a little bit about, you know, how do we write history? We have primary documents, we have secondary sources, we have iconography, we have all these different sources that we create, that we use to create music history. And I say, try to be creative. You could make up a PowerPoint or a scroll or a big poster board or whatever you want to do to describe your own history with this subject. Okay, so I asked them to relate personal anecdotes, mentors, influences that have led them to this particular area of study. As I say, I encourage creativity, and I've had amazing things. A couple of years ago, a woman made little books out of cardboard and put them in a little library, and each one of them was a part of her life. I mean, it was amazingly creative. So it allows students to place themselves in a continuum of learning, and it kind of breaks the ice too in terms of them thinking. So what happens is people do all these different things. They have them in. When I mark it just a check, check plus, check minus. I don't really give a grade to it because it's hard to grade something so personal. But what it does is then I say, okay, you just wrote music history. You've just become a musicologist because you've just written your own music history. And we talk about, okay, what did you use to write your music history? Was it pictures? Was it sound? Was it a narrative? What kinds of things did you use for this? And then what we do for the rest of the term, and this again I use in my first year class, is I ask them to just casually get up and present their music histories for other people. So in a place where they're trying to make connections, make friends, create a community, they can get up and talk about the music and the people that have been important to them, and they can ask questions and get to know each other. So even though in music it seems like that's an obvious thing to do, you could also do it in any class where people have some history, whether it's English literature or science. You know, what is your relationship with this subject? What have you done before? What is your history with this subject? And it really connects them in to what they're doing in a really creative way. And so I really enjoy doing this. And as I say, it's easy for me to do in my own field because of the passion my students have for their subject. But I really think it could be adapted to any subject where students have interest, or to generate interest in the subject that they maybe didn't know that they had a past relationship with it. So that's personal subject specific histories.
Excellent. And to be honest with you, I do kind of do something similar in my sociology of the body class. I get students to do what's called body mapping. And so they can either literally map their bodies onto a big piece of paper, or they can create a collage, or they can create a painting of some kind, but something pretty simple and straightforward, representing their body. And then they annotate it and describe and reflect on their bodies. And then, they can share it or not, but I want them to sort of get thinking about those sorts of things. So it is very subject specific, and it is often related to their histories, but I don't do this to the same degree at all that Elizabeth does. And so very good stuff.
Right.
All right. I'm going to move on to workshops. Now, some of you may, we all do increasingly workshops, especially as we move away a little bit, some of us, from more instructivist approaches, and we move toward more social constructionist kinds of ideas. As we move towards things like experiential learning, active learning, and so on, I think workshops can be particularly helpful. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples, and I have other examples as well. And I apologize if you've heard one or two of these before. So in the workshops, for example, I get in my gender class students to write a letter to Unilever. And by the way, they actually send the letter if they want. They don't have to send the letter. And they work in pairs. Here's what I do. I show them an ad for the Dove body campaign. And it's a fairly long, as an ad, it's fairly long. It's about 4 minutes long, where a young girls and their mothers are talking about body image, talking about their own bodies and their dissatisfaction with their bodies. And of course, Dove's big campaign over the last 15 years has been basically love yourself, body diversity, and so on. We then watch a pretty typical 30-second commercial called Billions. And this is by the Axe company. And what Axe does is sell body spray for young men. It's pretty smelly stuff. But anyway, so in this ad, you see groups of women clad in bikinis. You see all women in yellow bikinis in the jungle, and they're pushing and shoving and running in the same direction. You see a bunch of women in bikinis. Now they're red bikinis. They're on the beach and they're running towards something. They're all pushing and shoving. You see women in white bikinis. They're in the ocean and they're all swimming and they're rallying for top position. And at the end of the ad, you see this young man on the beach with two cans of Axe spraying himself like this. I'm just having a hard time showing you, but he has one in each hand and he's spraying himself back and forth like this. And all these women are converging on him. Now, what I do is I ask the students, so do you know who owns Dove? Do you know who owns Axe? They generally don't know. And it's the same company, and it's Unilever. So after we've just done a section on body positivity and gender, I get them to write a letter to Unilever about the conflicted messaging that they are sending out. Clearly, all they want to do is sell products, however they can sell them. It's interesting. I had a student once who was a commerce student who said, and what's wrong with that? They're just selling their product. I'm like, okay, you haven't been listening in class. No, I didn't say that. But that was their rationale, and that was their understanding, is whatever you need to do to sell a product, you do it. So that's one example. I'll give you another quick example because I'm trying to be conscious of time, is a seniors home development. And I've used a similar workshop in two of my classes. One is a socialization class. We go through socialization and how it works, and particularly end of life kinds of or socialization for older adults. And also for a youth class that I teach. Even though I teach a class on youth, the very last module is actually on seniors, because I think you can't really talk about youth without at some point talking about seniors. And so what I get students to do in this particular workshop is to think about what it might be like to be a senior, what it might be like to be living in a home. And of course, they have some readings they have to do in advance. And so they actually have to design a senior's home. So this is my way of getting them to be sort of thoughtful and reflective and engage around not just themselves. And most students in our classes are young, not all of them, but many of them are. So it keeps students engaged, it keeps them interested, it gets them applying what they've learned. And I think the creativity comes both from the development of the workshops and also from the response of the students, right? What have they done? Like, it's amazing what the students have created for their seniors' homes. It's, in terms of green space, in terms of ecological footprint and being responsive to that, in terms of how they're designed centrally, how they're also designed to give people independence and to encourage activity and so on, and to develop community. So it's really interesting to see what they develop. Elizabeth, do you want to speak on the workshops thing?
No, that's more your thing. I don't do this as
Okay.
much, but you go ahead and just talk about
Okay.
as much as you need. Yeah.
I'm done. I just want to, before I move on, I know this next one is mostly Elizabeth.
Okay. Oh, Tony's got a really interesting little video there on here. Okay,
Very
so
retro.
this is one of the things that I'm really glad I did, and I've talked about it before in presentations, and people are a little bit skeptical, but honestly, listen to me. I have a number of syllabi with different assignments, especially this first year foundation course, which I've been talking about a little bit up to now in this presentation, in which there are 10 or 11 different assignments that are completely different. And what I was finding was that the students would come to class, and in the very short time we had together, someone would say, "Can you go over the assignment again?" And then somebody else would say, "It's in the syllabus. She's given you detailed, numbered, things to go through. Why should we go over it again?" And they said, "Don't use class time for this." So I thought, okay, how can I solve this? The people who want me to go over it obviously just want a verbal kind of like in-person kind of description, because I have provided a very clear numbered series of steps to go through. So Toni and I went out one morning with a video camera, and we did a little video, 2 to 3 minute video explaining the assignment or giving more information on the course materials that we were doing. We didn't script it. We didn't take multiple takes. We went around to different places. Like I was talking about a news assignment. So I went over to where the newspaper office was. I went to, the park. I went to just all different places to make it interesting. And I just said, okay, here's what you need to know about this assignment. And I did exactly what I would do if I was going to go over it in class. It took us maybe 2 hours to do all of them. Toni uploaded them. And after that, I never had anybody say, can you go over the assignment in class? And what happened was I thought, these videos are not very sophisticated. I mean, it's just me, a talking head in the middle of the park. No one will watch this, so keep asking. What I found was not only were they watching it, people in other classes were watching them. They thought they were funny, or they thought they were fun or whatever. So I suddenly had the situation in which people could read the description if they wanted to in the syllabus. People could watch me. They could watch it anytime they want. They could watch it over and over again. They could watch it at any time during the course. And it was basically to enhance not only the understanding of the assignment, but a little bit more time with me, right? A little bit more time with FaceTime with me, even though they weren't directly talking to me. As Tony's put here, it's in line with universal learning. Anybody can watch these. If you didn't have a good sight or didn't have good reading, you could listen to it. And again, I've been using these. I've been updating them a little bit over the years. During COVID, during pandemic, I had a little kind of happy hour where I'd sit in my comfy chair in the living room and say, "Hey, this week we're going to be doing these things," and I have a little Perrier there, and I'd say, "Here's to you. Have a great week," and just sort of preview for them what was happening. Again, so there'd just be a little bit more of me during a time when they didn't have any access to me, when everything was online. So again, I found people will actually say in the evaluations, "This course had a happy hour. Like, how great is that?" Or, "I love the videos." So I can't emphasize enough how easy this is. You can do it on your phone. I've had my TAs I'm technologically challenged, so I've had my TAs just come in and do it on the phone and upload it. It's a fantastic way of connecting with students, of getting information across. And because it's not a 50-minute lecture that somebody has to commit to, it's really perfect for getting in touch with students and meeting their needs, especially for those who want a verbal, live description.
Mhm. And even though this was Elizabeth's idea, and I said, well, it's not, I actually do this now as well, but I just film myself in front of my camera like we are doing right now in front of my laptop. So I just stay in the same room. But the reason I do it is to describe the assignments in more detail that the students might need a little clarification about, or as we were mentioning, is in line with universal design for learning. So if you're not very good with text, or if you have a visual difference or something like that, having a video, even if you can't see us, because the seeing us is not even necessarily that important. If you can hear us, or if in fact your screen reader can understand us, then it works out perfectly well. I also use it now for forums. So, most forums are text-based, but I always respond now with video. And it's a really great way of being a little more engaging. The students can see me, they can hear me. I've got to be thoughtful and think about what I'm doing as well. And I also use it now for global responses to assignments. So what I do is I keep track of the kinds of themes I'm seeing running through assignments. Like generally it's the good and the bad, but I want students to improve. So I do focus on the sorts of things that I see repeated that could use some improvement. And so I post these global responses for everybody to see and say, well, here's what I've seen in this assignment. People are focusing on this or that, and it would be good to see more of this or that. So that's kind of how I've been using video, to be honest with you. And more we're recording our PowerPoints and flipping our classrooms too. And I've been doing that for a while too. But this was Elizabeth's idea. This wasn't my idea.
Yeah, but what's great about it too, so I just noticed someone just pop up in the chat saying this would save time in class. It doesn't only save time in class, it saves time out of class, because people say to me, how do you deal with students asking you questions about the syllabus of the assignments? I don't have students asking me about the syllabus of the assignments. I never get emails asking me to clarify something in an assignment. They get it all through these multiple modalities. So there's not that endless. People say, well, how do you have time to go through all this detail at the beginning? Well, do you have time to go through it 100 times over when people ask you later? This is the way to do it, is upfront and in a way that is very approachable.
Yeah, excellent.
Great.
Okay.
This is you.
This is me. A little bit about kind of learning portfolios. And I kind of do a learning portfolio light, if I'm being perfectly honest. There are lots of people who probably know a lot more about e-portfolios and learning portfolios than I do. But in a lot of my classes, I get students to, and in fact, I'm doing one right now that's inquiry-based entirely, but I get them to do these learning portfolios where they do things like submit a proposal, including and responding to questions about why they choose to do a particular topic, why they might choose a paper, a typical research paper over a project, let's say, what they hope to achieve, what they hope to learn, and then of course, structure about what it is they're going to do. And that can have a couple of iterations. So that can be one part of the portfolio, an annotated bibliography. Again, there can be drafts and there can be more than one version of the annotated bibliography. Peer review can become part of that portfolio as well. Sometimes I do this with checklists and with grading rubrics for them, or grading guides for that. They do their final paper or projects, and then also a reflective component. So you can see how this, and I've been doing this for a long, long time, how this aligns with a lot of experiential learning, for example. So I want them to think about the analysis. I want them to think about, did they meet their own needs? Did they meet their own expectations? Was your decision of a project or a paper a good one? What were the risks and benefits that you may have encountered? And most important, things that you learned. So this all becomes part of our portfolio, again, because there are often multiple iterations, because we do peer review, because I do give feedback on drafts, and because, of course, students then can select from their portfolio their final components that they want to present as their portfolios. So again, this is a portfolio light. It's not a full-out portfolio in the same kind of way. And I did have, interestingly, students who were in a class that was designed similar to this, who did life-size Barbie. You've probably heard me talk about life-size Barbie before. They created a life-size to scale Barbie as part of their portfolio, as part of their project that ended up being, in fact, in a publication. So there was a picture of them standing on either side. There were two of them on either side of life-size Barbie, and it went into a paper on Learning Portfolio. So they were quite excited to have themselves included in that. All right, how are we doing for time? 12:34. The next one is you, E.
Okay. This, I don't know why this is called Breakout Challenges. It's kind of a weird word, but I just came up with it one day, out of the blue. So for classes where the participation is expected, like I have some seminar classes where I don't have a lot of quizzes or exams. It's basically a seminar-based presentation and discussion-based class. I make participation a large component of the grade, so up to 25%, which may seem to you like too high, but if you're dealing with a class of like 8 to 10 people and people are like missing, they're missing a lot every time they miss the class. So for each missed class, I assign this thing called a Breakout Challenge, where a student writes a short reaction paper to the material or has an interview with the instructor over the material. What I often do, and I do this in a course where I'm teaching right now called Music and Difference, which is about othering. And so for the first couple of classes, if somebody has to miss, I already have these listed in the syllabus. I want you to write a short reaction paper on this, that, or the other thing. For other times when someone is away, I don't have to take a sick note or penalize them or give them fewer participation marks. I just ask them to do a breakout challenge. Well, I've done this with classes up to 40 people, and it still works really, really well because it means that they engage with the material. No matter what happens, they have to engage with the material. For quiet students, and we all have these students who are shy, they don't feel comfortable talking in front of people, or they don't feel they're very good at it, they can just not talk and do a breakout challenge. And they're very easy to mark. I mean, it's just basically I make a couple of comments on their reactions, but it's a way for them to contribute and for people who are not there to contribute and still earn their participation grade. So this is not a very long thing to describe, but I really like it. And as I'm moving more away from the sort of testing, quizzing, that kind of a model of class, to more seminar-based and discussion-based classes, I find this is a fantastic way of connecting with students and getting them to engage with material in a way that is not punitive, but is in fact encouraging and collaborative.
And again, in line with universal design principles and also with EDID, right? The sorts of things that increasingly we know are important if we want to be inclusive and nurture community within our own classes and nurture participation. So yeah, absolutely. All right. So here's one, multimedia tests online. So I've had a rather wrought relationship with testing. It's not exactly my thing, but there have been a couple of situations where for sometimes practical reasons or to align with particular departmental needs, I've had to do tests. And I'll do some things to mix that up a bit and do things like collaborative testing. But here's another thing that I found I've had pretty decent success with. I've quite liked it. And that is multimedia testing online, something you can't do in a paper-based test, right? Because how do you add multimedia to a piece of paper? You can't do it. So instead, what you can do is online in your learning management system in Moodle or whatever it happened to be, you can actually add multimedia. And you can also even do this in class. Now, I do mention here, well, be aware of timing, especially if you're trying to keep students on the same question, because sometimes that will come up. But you could possibly do it in class. An example I use, and I use this for my contemporary sociological theory class when I teach it, is, for example, I have a video by Ani DeFranco called 32 Flavors, and I've also used another one that Ani DeFranco wrote and thing called Binary as well, and I use that in a gender class. And I get them to actually listen to the song, and then they have to answer a question. So it's not something they've encountered before. They have to think about it. So in terms of Bloom's taxonomy, we're moving up quite significantly. And that's one of the really interesting things I find about these multimedia questions, even multiple choice kinds of questions when you think about it. Recently, a colleague, I was helping them with something with some tests where they are actually recording themselves and doing some testing. So this is for a Mi'kmaq language class, and they in fact are creating multiple choice questions. They are creating 4 possible responses where they record themselves saying different things. They sometimes also record and then ask for text-based questions, but it's really interesting to see. And this particular faculty member said, I really want to bring Mi'kmaq language to life through sort of its orality, because in fact it is oral, right? That's Mi'kmaq is in fact focused more on oral than text. You can even do things like chemistry demos and use those to ask questions about, so what's happening in this demo? Why is this a reduction question, let's say? Why is this an oxidation? Sorry, I said question, I meant reaction. Why is this a reduction reaction? Why is this an oxidation reaction? What is going on here? Why is this Lewis diagram incorrect, for example, if they are incorporating Lewis diagrams? So my point is, you can use this for science as well. It doesn't have to just be in the social sciences and arts and humanities. And you don't have to create them yourselves, right? You don't have to create the videos. You can go to YouTube. There's youtube.com/education. There's tons of stuff. There's Merlot. There are lots of things that you can find online. And as we know, increasingly, that's the case. And you can incorporate those into really engaging questions. Okay, let's see. 12:40. We might not get through all of them today, so because we might decide to have some time for questions.
Let's see what's next, Toni, and see. Oh, performance projects. Well, this is really yours.
Yeah.
This is more yours. Do you want to do it quickly? Because I'm going to throw in a new thing at the end of the presentation, which you've never talked about before.
Oh, okay.
It's brand new, but it's short. So go ahead.
So I'll just say that, so I give students the options to do things like papers or projects. Those projects can be performance. I've had some wonderful performance pieces. I've had poems. I've had modifications, let's call them, of well-known top 40 songs. I've had new original songs. I've had stand-up comedy. I have had dance a few times as well. So I've had different interesting performance projects. But specifically a few years ago, when I was teaching a course in primary and secondary socialization, I teamed up with a 4th-year anthropology of performance class. And we had about 4 or 5 students per group from my class. It was a larger class, and one student who was the mentor from the anthropology performance class, and we ended up putting on a large performance at the end of all of these groups. So it was an interesting thing. Students in my class did have to write an analysis, and it's an interesting alternative to papers. I think, in fact, because we've done that not too badly in terms of timing, I think we're okay, Elizabeth. I did want to include this by Rita Mae Brown, and then I'll hand it back over to you, Elizabeth, to introduce your new idea. Creativity comes from trust your instincts, and never hope more than you work. So I mentioned at the top of the hour that work is kind of an important part of creativity, right? Those who are much more creative than I am, and in fact, who do much more creative kinds of work, I know that in fact, it is work. It's fun work, but it is work. Elizabeth, you wanted to add something.
I wanted to add something new that I just thought of it. I just thought it would be a nice way to wrap up the Cornucopia of Creativity. I'm just going to hold up a book here, but I'll tell you what it's called: The Practice, Shipping Creative Work by Seth Godin. And Seth Godin is a popular writer on marketing, and he's written a number of books, very engaging writer, kind of a pithy style. But I picked up this book because I thought of that it might be interesting for class. And in fact, I realized in reading it that we're all creatives. You know, it took me a long time to realize that what I do as a musicologist, as a music historian, is create knowledge, is to write, is to come up with ideas. That's what excites me, and that's what I like about my work. The same thing with teaching. I want to come up with ideas and do new things. And so what I want to convince students is that they are also primarily creatives. Even if they don't think of themselves as arts and humanities people, if they don't think of themselves as artistic in any way or crafty in any way, every day what they do is they do the work, right? They create knowledge for themselves, for their professors, for their colleagues. They write, they read, they create all the time. And so when I read this book, it had these wonderful little quotes about shipping creative work, you know, getting the work done and shipping it, making sure it gets done. So what I'm going to do this year for my foundation class, and probably for some of my other classes, is take little quotes from this. And at the beginning of each class, I'm just going to read a little quote about creativity and getting the work done and doing what you need to do, that never hope more than you work, and discuss it with students as a way to kind of instigate or inspire the idea that we're all creatives, and that all that we are doing and what animates us as human beings is creativity. So I just wanted to throw that in there. I think anybody would enjoy this very quick read. And you might be able to use it as a discussion points in your classes.
Excellent. And Rita Mae Brown is a great writer. I really like Rita Mae Brown's work. So if you happen to have never encountered Rita Mae Brown before, I encourage you to seek them out. I think there's just a couple of last slides, but in fact, this is kind of a place I think where we can happily end without going forward, and that is if you want a PDF from this presentation, we put together a list of tips for implementation. You can email either of us and we can send that on to you, or maybe Neil, we should send it to you. I'm not sure, but whoever, if you want it, you can contact any one of us and we can make sure we get that to you. Now, we didn't spend too much time talking about how you might implement it in your class if you had if you teach in a different discipline or what have you, but we've got some time left, so we can talk about some of these right now, talk about how you might be able to implement them or modify them for your particular context, or in fact, just generally any questions you might have or comments. So I'm going to open it on up. I might stop sharing maybe just to...
Yeah, stop sharing so we can see you.
Yeah.
Because I can't see you.
Okay. Whoops. Let me stop.
Andrew Nurse raised hand. Okay, Andrew Nurse wants to talk to us.
Oh, I don't know, Andrew.
Yeah, beware of that one.
I had a question about early adopter effects to creative things, and in Canadian Studies a number of years ago, we adopted a particular assignment for our intro classes that was designed to meet certain objectives, and it did certain things, and had a really positive effect. And it was so positive, we started boasting about it. Then other people started doing it, and then pretty soon, a whole bunch of people were doing it, and students started to complain about having to do this same assignment in all of their classes. So it went from something that was different, perhaps a little fun, they enjoyed it, to, oh wow, I've got to do another one of these. And do you, so I guess the question is about, have you had that kind of experience, and is that sort of a reason to be sort of creative on a continual way, always introducing something new and fun?
Yeah, do you want to answer that first, Toni?
Sure, I have had that happen. I've had it happen where my colleagues and friends in the department and even beyond have started doing the things that I've been doing. And then students are like, oh yeah, that's just like that other class. And I'm like, oh, well, this is actually something that I developed. And so I have had that happen quite a bit. So it does kind of, in a sense, require that you maybe shift a little bit or change a little bit or be creative yet again, right? It's a continual process. But at the same time, even if students even if students are doing something creative in their work, let's say, I don't think it's a bad thing for myself and a colleague and others in my department to have the ability to do a project, let's say, or to be able to choose what they research if you're using an inquiry-based approach. So you're right, in a sense, it becomes sort of normalized, for lack of a better word. But I also think we also have to be attentive to how much can we really do. We can only really do so much, but at the same time, it does nudge us, doesn't it? Because I often feel like, oh gosh, okay, I feel like I'm old. Well, I am old, but I feel like maybe what I'm asking students to do is getting a little tired. And so I do modify things a fair bit, if I'm being really honest with you.
Yeah, and I found in my department, one of the things we do in music is called a listening journal. So students are assigned particular listening, and they write up either their reactions to it, their visceral and intellectual reactions, or they describe the music. And you think, oh, this is so creative. They're talking about what they think. They would express themselves. They write, and then you find that everybody's doing listening journals, and the students are like, enough with the listening journals already. So what I do now is I try to check in with my colleagues. What are you doing this year? Like, what kind of assignments are you doing? So we're not just repeating the same methodologies over and over again. And I'm really lucky. I'm glad that Linda Pierce is here today. We're musicologists, and we're going to have a nice Joey's meal and talk about curriculum. And it's not just going to be about what do we want to do in terms of offering courses for the next couple of years, but what are our modalities going to be? Like, what do you want to do? What do I want to do? So that the students get a really nice global idea. So I know with a lot of departments, curriculum is a cutthroat issue, and everybody has these very specific ideas of what's happening. But if you can get along with your colleagues, I think this is a great conversation to have, so that you're not just doing the same thing over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Linda Pierce raised hand.
Okay, Linda.
Hi. First of all, just thank you so much. That was really wonderful. And we are very fortunate to get along. And I can just say how often I find myself going to ideas that I've heard Elizabeth generously share when I'm thinking about how to reinvent my own courses. I'm like, oh, I remember she said something about, and then I will do that. And I'm going to shamelessly give an example of that happening right now. With your example, I think it was Toni, you were talking about having them write a letter to Unilever. And I had an instance in class yesterday where we compared two different versions of La Traviata. We went to the Vogue Theater on Sunday and watched one, and then I brought in another version, and we looked at a specific scene where Violetta, who is this like 19th century courtesan who's being othered because she's a courtesan and has TB, and there's a social class love that is never going to happen, and then she's dies or is killed off in some way. And in this way, she's killed off because she dies of TB. And they other her in both operas, but they do it in different ways. And the students were really offended by it for different reasons. One, because she was othered by having racialized people dance on stage as a sign of her monstrosity. And the other, they had a man dress up in a red dress and pose as a trans person, parade around the stage garishly, and they were like viscerally like angered. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've got this assignment this weekend. That's going to be an option on the assignment, is to write a letter to the Metropolitan Opera and do an analysis of both scenes and tell them why this, you know, what you liked and what you didn't like about this, what was offensive about it. So I'm stealing that, or I'm borrowing it and saying thank you to you both for such an awesome presentation, just so rich with ideas.
Thank you.
My pleasure. And I'm sorry we went kind of quickly through some of those. But yeah, I do like to develop workshops where I'm actually reaching out in one way or another. So in another class, for example, in a methods class, a qualitative methods class, we talk about a number of methods, including photo voice. And I don't get them to do a big project on a photo voice, but what I've done in the past is say, okay, do you have a device of some kind? If they don't, I give them one. I carry a few extras with me. And I say, okay, go out onto campus, spend 30 minutes. That's all you need right now. Spend 30 minutes of class time. My classes are usually like in a 3-hour block. And go take photos of things that are meaningful to you, are important to you, and so on. And so they go out and do that, and then they come back, and then they have to basically annotate them. They have to describe them, explain why they're important, explain why those places and spaces mean something to them. And they share them in class, and it's amazing what the students will say, things that you never imagined, and what they will share about spaces and places that you just walk by every day and just think, oh, that's just a, you know, a breezeway, you know, in between the Crabtree and the library. And someone says, well, this is where I meet my friend every day, and this is what we do, and we talk about our classes, and so on, and we talk about important things in our lives, whatever it happens to be. So sometimes they can be you know, quite enriching for you as well. So yeah, I really like the workshop things if you can kind of think of some fun and creative things for the students to do.
Somebody else had their hand up a little while ago.
Okay.
It was me.
Hi.
Hi. Hi, Toni and Neil. Hi again. I really appreciated this session. Is there more?
Strangely enough, when we did this, I was just saying as people were coming in, we did this session at Stelly one year, and the room was, I don't know why, I guess it's, the word is out, but the room was packed with people standing in the doorways and sitting on the floor. And we went through this, and we said, this was so successful, let's do a second one. So we actually have a part 2. And we decided when we were looking through the materials this past couple of weeks that we would use, we like this one the best. But if people are interested next year and we're still doing better together, I think Toni and I would be happy to come back and do another cornucopia. Yeah.
Oh, it's wonderful. My hand was raised because it was echoing Andrew, I think, mentioned the kind of creativity overload, if it, you know, it's original at first, but then everybody starts doing it. And I've noticed that we're doing that at the Faculty of Education at SANFX. You know, we have teacher candidates. So I mean, that, you know, we're just it's all about creativity and what they can bring to their own classrooms and have their own students do. So it's like, you know, and they have to do a portfolio from the beginning of their first year to the end of their second year. They have to do that continuous portfolio, but they have required components that they have to insert in, and they get, what I've noticed this year, this is my first year, I've just finished my first year ever in higher education. I taught a public school for 13 years before that, and I noticed this tiredness, this exhaustion, and really, like in French we say un dégoût, for portfolios, which is completely the opposite of what it's supposed to be, right? It kind of killed the creativity, and I was kind of sad to see that they were, you know, in their minds they never want to do portfolios again in their life. But I mean, as they become teachers, wouldn't that be nice if they could implement this? But they hated it. Like, by the end, they are so tired and exhausted of it, you know. And I'm wondering, like, how do we, and I think Elizabeth mentioned the communication within the faculty might be one of the solutions to this, to say, okay, how can we, you know, reorganize this so that it doesn't become a burden and kills the creativity there, you know? So,
And another practical possibility, and I'm not certain what you're doing with your portfolios, and so this might not be helpful, is so even if the novelty of portfolios has worn off, perhaps what can change though is what they include in the portfolios. So are they allowed to include audio? Are they allowed to include video? Are they allowed to include multimedia? Can they include material created by other people that they can then comment on? So maybe that is also part of it. I'm not sure. Again,
yeah, I think, and I mean, this is, what I've noticed at the faculty is that, things have been done for a certain way for a really long time. And it's, inserting change or incorporating change seems to be like a slow process. And I think it's just now that they've kind of transferred to the e-portfolio, as where before, like the binders are this thick before they, it's just not practical. But also another reason for it being discouraging for them is that I think they're told that this is your professional portfolio. So when you go for, job interviews and when you go to school boards and this, you can bring this, and it's not true. They're not interested. Employers are not interested in a portfolio. And so there is a discrepancy there between what we're, saying that it should be used for, and there's an awful lot that is required, like, lesson plans. Pages and pages and pages of lesson plans that they're never going to actually, use. Like they might use it, but I mean, in teaching, and especially now the trends in teaching, it's much more dynamic and fluid than having this prepared, binder of lesson plans. And so I think that I do recognize that we need to kind of have fresh eyes and new ways to kind of modify this whole requirement of this professional portfolio, but anyways.
Well, I think part of it too might be acknowledging that disconnect then, if it exists, to say, although you may not actually be using this for your professional life, it's important for your learning life, right? And so, and I think another component maybe is to ensure that it actually is reviewed. I'm not sure what happens with because sometimes portfolios can be massive, and having enough time to review them might be, is that the case, Danny?
Yeah. And, but it's a good point. And I mean, I'm new, so, these are things I'm thinking about, and how I'm going to introduce this in, in a system or a structure that's already really well anchored.
Mm-hmm.
I
And
noticed people are,
oh, go ahead.
I'm just noticing it's 12:59.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, we might be done.
You might be done. Not to cut you off, but I'm just going to say a lot of people, I know some people are having to cut out now, so maybe
dawdling off. They have to leave. Bye, Andrew.
Bye, Andrew.
We can make a creative use of time.
There we go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you so much, Danny. I really loved your question too. Thank you. And,
thank you. Yeah, it was great to see everyone, and this was awesome. Thank you so much for inviting us.
Oh.